welcome to All Things Indian Friendly Voices. This is episode 8. And today we are going to have the second episode of freelancing in India. A lot of friends, they wrote to us or they talked to us on the phone, me and Suresh, and then they sent a lot of good feedback and questions to be asked. That is why we are having this second episode. Maybe if more people write to us asking more questions, maybe we'll have episode 3. So let's see. Let's see how it goes. And some interesting questions have come, interesting feedback, silly feedback as usual. So, but still, over and above, it's a fantastic feeling that many people are watching. And of course, some lazy bums are there out there. So they all see, for example, when I tweeted, the impressions of Twitter activities, analytics showed that 24,000, only 500 people have seen this. But that means nobody goes and clicks. Maybe they see the thumbnail, they see the topic, and they run away, I guess. I don't know. So whatever it is, so thank you very much. Please keep writing to us or talk. You can always call us and give a feedback. And today we have we have Ranjani, Milinta, Suresh with us. So we'll start, and we'll start with the very basic questions. Well, it's bad on our part also. We didn't ask this question. It's a very fundamental question. So we'll start with Ranjani. Why do people take up freelancing?
It could be for various reasons. I know people who've taken up freelancing because that's the only option they have. In the sense that they need to be at home at all times. Work from home is necessary, whether they're giving elder care or they're taking care of children. I also know somebody who is disabled and prefers to work from home. The ability to work from home and the ability to work at whatever time they want to is an important factor. I personally stayed with freelancing. Like I told the last time, I started freelancing because I got fired, but I stayed with freelancing because it made me significantly more money than a full-time job ever paid me at that point. So it just seemed like the more financially smarter thing to do. I also know people who just want the freedom, right? I hate my boss. I've had 5 jobs. I hate all my bosses. I just want to have the ability to say no. That's one reason. I also know people who freelance because they're not getting full-time work. And every time they get into an interview for full-time work, they're being lowballed because they're saying, oh, as a freelancer, you made only 2 lakhs last year. I will give you only 3 lakhs this year. Right? So there's a variety of reasons people freelance, and I've just named a few.
Okay. Milinta?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did speak a little bit about this in the last session also at the beginning, but like Ranjani said, I completely agree with her. It's either out of choice or out of necessity. Right? You either have to work your work schedule around your personal life. That becomes a necessity for you to do. Or like she mentioned, I think that's quite comprehensive. Like you want to have the freedom to say no to some kind of work. You want to say no, the freedom to say no to some kind of people, which is very important. So I think that's just those two things. It's not very complicated at all. It's a choice that you tend to make depending on a variety of factors. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I will also add my experience here briefly. I came into freelancing because at a certain point, I realized that if I needed to go up in the corporate ladder, there's a lot more than just the talent that was required. Like till the time I reached a point, it was completely my talent. There's nothing else. In fact, most of my bosses were wary of me, I would say. I wouldn't say they hated me, but they were not like, like I was not their favorite guy type of thing, but still I was able to rise up. But at a certain point, I realized that it is much more than just your talent. At that point, it was up to us to make the decision whether, you want to play the game of corporate, whatever you call that, or you decide, no, this is not for me. That I don't have the drive enough to want to become a CEO or a senior vice president of something. And then you take a call. Okay, at this point in time, it's better to go ahead and do something on your own. So that's my background. Now, using this, I want to ask the next question. See, when I was planning to move out, I was in a good job, but I knew that it's just a matter of time before I moved out. I spoke to one senior person. He was a manpower consultant. He was running his own company, and he was someone I used to discuss often for when I wanted to shift a job. And he was a very sensible man. So when I spoke to him that I wanted to move out, he said, Suresh, there are two issues here. One, of course, is the social issue that, people will think that you got fired, right? And people will think maybe you're not good enough for the job. And that's why you're going freelancing and all that. That will be there because he said he also was in a corporate job and then he started his own company. He said that's one thing. And then he said a second thing is very interesting. He said, the second problem I always tell people that they would face when they become freelancing is that the feeling that you may not be needed. So he said that if you are in a company, starting from whether it's a CEO all the way up to the person who changes milk in the coffee vending machine, there's a feeling that you are needed in the company, right? Once you come out and become a freelancer, you are like, nobody needs you, no company needs you, and you are on your own. This sort of a feeling has broken many people. You're saying like psychologically affected a lot of people. So I wanted to ask you, did you guys go through such a feeling, or a feeling that, we are now on our own, totally lost, there's no support for us type of a thing? And how did you handle this? We start probably with Milinda this time.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree with that. So there is, of course, this feeling of being slightly unmoored, like you don't have an anchor to hold on to when you step into this. I think the first stage of, dealing with that would probably, I'm not an expert in any of this, but from my own personal experience, the first step is when you've decided to go into this venture, into freelancing, you have to be very accepting of the fact that this is how it is. You're not going to be fixed to any one particular, affiliated to any one particular organization or a client for all through your career. It's going to keep changing. Even if you work with a great client for a wonderful project, it is going to come to an end at some point, and you're going to have to move on. So once you become more accepting of that fact itself, then it becomes quite easier from then on. For me, that was a major challenge at the beginning. You can prove yourself to be extremely valuable, but you're not indispensable. You can make yourself as valuable as possible. For me, I was like, okay, so now they don't need me. They need somebody else, is it? So, that sort of a feeling did used to come in at the beginning. But then I realized that when you make yourself really valuable, you're going to find other places to move on to. And this is not going to affect or bother you as much as it did earlier. So that's the first way of dealing with it. And the second one, which is very important, I would say, is keep a network of freelancers around you. Stay in touch or connected with other freelancers, preferably in the same field. That helps a lot because you're staying updated, you're staying in touch. You have this feeling that, okay, if there is a problem that I'm facing, if there is something that I need help with, there's at least somebody that I can speak to who's going to, lend an empathetic ear to what I have to say. So that is very important. So that's what I try to do as well. I have a network of people in education who I can speak to if the need arises. So that really helps. And recently I also heard that, there's a group of people who've come together to sort of try and unionize employees in the IT and ITES sector. I heard this a couple of days ago. It's very new to me as well. I don't know many details about it, but I think that's a great thing to do. And that includes freelancers as well. So then you have like a legit platform or a forum to voice your opinions or to raise your issues or talk about your problems. In a very organized way. Yeah. So I think if that comes about, then that's a great thing to do. Let's see how it goes for the other organizations or for other fields as well. Yeah. And if all else fails, then there's obviously therapy, guys. You have to go to therapy.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Ranjan.
Yeah. My experience is actually entirely the opposite. So the first time I started freelancing, I got fired very unceremoniously, right? And then about 3-4 years later, a recruiter chased me down and hired me for this organization, which laid me off in 6 months. So in fact, I was not needed in any of my corporate gigs. But when I started freelancing, I had a customer who I started with in 2015, maybe 14, 15. And so I was on a retainer with him until I stopped freelancing and went to full-time work. The moment I came back, I wrote out to everybody saying, oh my God, I got laid off. What a stupid person I am. And the first thing he said was, I will put you back on a retainer. I don't know what I did without you for 6 months. Come right back, I'll put you on a retainer. I was on a retainer with that client until April, when the scale of what he needed was extremely high, because he is in the business of disaster management technology. So when COVID hit, he wanted like a really escalated support for taking his product to the market. And I was not able to offer that support. And so I just came in and said, listen, I can't do this for you. You need to find someone local. He was a US client. And he said, okay. And I haven't been worked with him since. This morning, he wrote an email to me saying, Ranjini, I have work that is not at that big scale, but I need it well done and I need you to do it. You charge me whatever you want. And I've had multiple customers like that who keep coming to me. I also have clients who move from one company to the other and then take me along. I have never felt needed in a workplace. I've always felt manipulated, and I felt like my bosses sort of wanted to mold me a certain way. And my natural response to that was resistance. I've never felt not needed by a client. I've said no to more people than I've said yes to. I've always helped them out. And I've had people I've said no to refer clients who are more suitable for the kind of work I do. I've only found goodness. Of course, there's these one or two people who, like, basically problems come when they have to pay. And even that has been very minimal, but I've never felt not needed as a freelancer. And I think there are two reasons why that happens. One is I do very, very niche work. The kind of technology writing that I'm able to do, like, I understand enough technology and I can write reasonably well, especially B2B technology. There's not many people who compete in that market. So the fact that I'm one of the few helps. And the second thing is I have very close relationships with all my customers. Yesterday, a customer wrote back to me after 3 months and said, I'm sorry this white paper dropped off the radar, but can we pick it up now? And my first, I replied to him immediately saying, you waited on it for 3 months and now you want me to finish it in 1 week. How do you think that's fair? And she said, I know it's not fair, but come figure it out with me. Right? So I have a relationship with the customer where I can tell them that this is not done and they will figure it out with us. So I work really hard on having personal relationships with individuals. And so when they go to the next job, they take me along, but also they know that what they see is what they get with me. Like, I don't play mind games, I don't send stinker emails, I don't do any of that. But if something doesn't work, I will just pick up the phone and say, listen, this doesn't work for me. So that also helps.
Yeah.
So I don't think freelance makes you feel less needed or lonely at all. To me, it has been the opposite. More people need me now than they did when I was at full-time work.
Okay,
Yeah.
there are not many. Sorry,
Yeah.
sir.
No,
Sorry,
no. Before you go ahead, I just wanted to put in one small thing. What I want to probably tell freelancers coming out, and as Milinta is saying, right, we feel that there's nobody needing us, like we are disposable. What we realize in freelancing is this aspect of you being disposable is actually what constitutes freedom. That is what freedom is. You're not attached to anybody. So you can actually do what you want. And there are times when I really don't want to do something for a week. I don't want to be attached to anybody because of whatever other reasons. So yes, that's definitely a major issue for many people initially. But as Milinta had said, that as you go along, you will slowly figure out ways to deal with it. But that's a very important part to deal with when you are a very young and a new freelancer. This can happen. I mean, as Ranjani says, sometimes your experience could be completely different, which is fine. But from speaking to a lot of freelancers, I mean, a lot of guys speak to me when they're going out. I get the same feeling that they're all extremely nervous that they are not in a company and that they are not probably needed. And therefore, I keep talking to anybody who comes to me and telling them, you know, what will happen. Wait, things will fall in place. Try to help as much as you can. But yeah, Rajni.
If I may just add on to that, I've also noticed that a lot of there's this problem of communication, right? Like, let's say I send an email and the client hasn't responded for a week. Before I went on antidepressants and anxiety medication, I would have stayed up all day thinking, oh my God, the client hates me. Now I just send an email saying, hey there, I haven't heard from you. Should I be worried? And that's okay. Like they will just tell you, no, I don't think this is working. We are figuring it out internally. Or, no, I've just been busy. I will get back to you tomorrow. Either way, it's fine to just, I mean, as you mature as a freelancer, you sort of also realize that just because they haven't spoken to you in 1 week does not mean they hate you, which is a very natural worry that comes when you just get started.
Yeah, when you get started, it's an entirely different ball game. Also, it's very different when you are a freelancer who has to actively go and find work. When you don't run your, when work doesn't find you, or when you don't run your own business, then there's a lot of other issues. Like you're not just going to sit around waiting for work to come to you, right? Because you need the money. Then that's very important. These things also play on your mind. And when you immediately don't find work after another project, you're going to start feeling like, okay, now is nobody going to need me next? What next? So that definitely comes in. And like Ranjani says, it takes a little bit of time to get over that arc. You will get over it eventually, but it's not very romantic at the beginning. It's not very easy at the beginning.
That's true. Because earlier it was same with me. Like, okay, I can see 2 months down the line, and after that, nothing is there. But later, things keep coming, right, at their own pace. And now, if something gets cancelled a day before or something, sometimes I feel very relieved because I need time to do something. See, what people have to understand is many a times we think that we take up freelancing because we'll get more free time. It may actually become the opposite if you do not manage your time, because once you are known and you will get flooded with work and you will be very scared to say no to anybody. And then once you take it up, it will be opposite of what you wanted to actually be, right? I mean, you'll be earning money, no doubt about that. But the purpose that you wanted to have more time, you wanted to have a relaxed lifestyle, it will not work out. Rajman, sorry for not giving you time.
No problem. But Milinda and Suresh, Ranjani said not many do tech writing well. That is because there's a person called Ranjani who did not use Dr. Rajmohan. Okay, that is why. I mean, there are some. Anyway, so, but Ranjani also referred to something like somebody trying to mold her into something. That's part of any kind of company. There are company principles, policies, and they want everybody, employees, to fit into that. Okay, now that involves 2 things. One is time, another is money. So if freelancers are just experts or ready-made solutions that can fit into many things, so will it actually help be beneficial to the employers, organizations, to outsource everything to freelancers? I mean, it cancels out many overhead costs. Yeah, Ranjani.
Okay. Freelancers will work out to be expensive. I'm saying this because I've hired freelancers to do work for my firm, and freelancers will turn out to be more expensive than hiring somebody full time. The other thing is outsourcing to a freelancer also means that you need to be clear about what you want, brief properly, keep track of things, and there's a lot more that comes to working with a freelancer. What people generally do, like the best projects to freelance are in my opinion, are the ones where you need expertise, like a specific kind of expertise. Let's say, for example, that you want to create one really good white paper for one campaign. Hiring someone to do that, or assigning somebody who's already filled with work for something like that might be a waste of energy. So you get somebody else to do it from the outside, it will get done and it will also get done well. But otherwise, giving all your work to a freelancer is a bit of an organizational and administrative nightmare. There is like you can't find a freelancer where you can just pick up the phone and say, hey, can you send this in the next 5 minutes? Any freelancer who's done this for 3-4 years is going to say no, because my days are already planned. I already, like, the next 5 minutes have been associated with something else already. So that kind of, hey, can you do this, won't happen. Freelancers generally prefer meetings with agendas and have something accomplished at the end. You can't just generally be like, hey, let's go to the conference room and have a chat and then just walk into the conference room and order some chai and just chat up with a freelancer. They will expect to have an outcome out of it. So I don't think the solution for employers would be to just outsource everything. It will be more expensive in terms of money, time, and generally energy. And also the freelancer will still have the freedom to say no to you at some point, which means you'll have to find another freelancer. Right? Okay. And the amount of notice they will give you or the amount of transfer they will do for you, they will have all the, like, it won't even be like you can archive the email ID and have information. So there's a lot more that comes with actually giving away your organizational knowledge to a freelancer. I think as an employer, you should employ freelancers more for what they bring to you and employ people full-time for a salary for things that you want to keep within yourself. That's how I would approach.
Yeah. Okay.
Milinda.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm so like Shri Ranjini said, it is quite expensive, I would say. But not in all fields, because not all fields have the same sort of same industry standards or the same sort of pay grade for freelancers and full-time work. It varies from field to field, and education, I think, generally itself pays peanuts. So full-timers themselves make like really less money in education, and freelancers make really less. But even then, I think like for a certain area or field of expertise, and like she put it very nicely, like if you want something brought to the table, then you have to bring in people specifically for that. But to get your work done on a regular daily basis as and when you require it, then a freelancer is definitely not going to be up for it, right? Because we've chosen the convenience of being freelancers because we don't want to do that. We don't want to keep dancing to your whims and fancies, which is why I am a freelancer. So I'm not going to say yes to anything and everything that somebody wants me to do. So for that, organizations are going to continue to require full-timers no matter what. And but again, the other side to this is that when somebody has to go, it's going to be the freelancer first, because you cannot just let go of people who are working full-time in your organization and say, hey, I no longer need you. Because you will need somebody to do the very basic essential things that need to be done in an organization. They will need to keep running. So you're not going to let go of people easily, full-timers, as easily as you can let go of freelancers. So that's the other flip side to it, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So now coming to the other point we were discussing earlier, right? That all said and done, depending on, which phase of freelancing you are in, or whichever phase you are in, there are going to be times when, a week or sometimes even a couple of weeks, you may not have a job, in the sense that you may not be having a job, especially if you are an individual freelancer. So question is, how do you handle this part? First, of course, is the psychological issue of, why is there not some job, will new job come or not, is one. But let's assume that we have got over that. We are confident that things will flow. But this particular break, how do you think people should handle it the best, right? What should they be doing? Yeah, Milind.
Yeah, so see, the first thing I think that should be done is you should figure out why you don't have that work, right? So first thing to do is to see, okay, I don't have work for 2 weeks now. Why is that? Is it a choice that I made, or is it work not coming to me? or do I want to do something else at this point? So that's the first thing you have to think about instead of just sitting and wallowing. So for me personally, there have been only two instances where I really struggled to find work. One, when I was starting out, like I said in the previous session that we had, I didn't have enough work experience, and so work didn't find me. So that's the first time. And the second was during COVID, when unceremoniously all freelancers were like, okay, get out. So then I didn't have work. So then I took some time to figure out, okay, now what should be done? I don't have work for like, I didn't have work for like 2.5 up to 3 months. So the first few days went by hoping that work will come back. But then when I realized no, then you start looking at other options. Okay, what are the things that you do next proactively to find work? And when you find something else to do, for example, I knew that face-to-face training or consulting or teaching, all of those things are going to take a long time to come back, right? It's not going to be anytime soon. For this, we are in this what is called as a new normal. For this to change again, it's going to be quite a while. So I have to look at other options other than what I've done so far for about 2 years. So when I look at that, I realized that online training, online consulting was going to be big. There was going to be a big boom in that. It took me a little while to figure that out. Okay, so now that I figured this out, am I immediately going to find work again? No, because I don't have the expertise for that yet, right? So I can't just walk into an office and say, hey, give me this job because I've taught for 2 years. I've trained so many people. They're going to ask, okay, have you done online teaching? Have you done online consulting? Have you done online training? No. So then I have to upskill. I have to scale up my skill set to be able to do this. So I did online courses. So once you identify the gaps as to why there's no work, you have to fill in those gaps with knowledge. Only then it's going to work. You have to say, okay, let me upskill. I did a few courses on Coursera. I did online trainings. I actually did pro bono work with an organization. I did as it is, we are being paid less, but then I went even further down and did pro bono because I needed that experience. I needed to put it on my resume just for that selfish purpose, not out of any altruism. I needed to put it there so that I can find work that pays. So I did it for a couple of weeks. And then I started to speak to people, network with people. Like I said earlier, you maintain a social network, right, of similar freelancers. So then you get word of mouth, okay, which organization is hiring? Who's doing what work, how much does this pay, how much flexibility does this offer? So then you think around all of those things. Maybe use LinkedIn, use your social media if you are, if you're well versed in using that. Put all of this together later on, and then typically, or ideally, work will find you. Once you've gone through all of these stages, then there's no way you're just going to sit simply for like months. You will go. But if you're just going to sit simply and keep thinking, okay, work will come, it's going to get better, this is just a slump. It's never just a slump unless you want it to be a slump. Unless you want to take the break, it's never like that. Something will be wrong somewhere which you can fix. Either it's the situation around you, external factors, or some gaps within your own skill set. You have to fix that. So look at what it is and fix that, and then move on to finding more work. So that's the process that I follow. It could be different for different people, but this is what has worked for me.
Nice. I agree with 100% of what she's saying in terms of how to handle your free time to do more work. What I want to add to that is I personally think of that kind of time as opportunity to do what I've never been able to do. I've talked about this before. So I have two things. I have one that's called the rainy day task list. So every time I have an idea, I have a dream, I have like, when I get that feeling that I want to do more than what I'm currently doing, but I don't have the time for it, I always put it in what I call a rainy day task list, saying someday I will be free and I will take care of that. And the moment I'm free, that's where I run. That's one. The second thing is also I have an idea book where I keep writing down ideas for what I could write about. So basically today I watch a movie and that movie is about certain, I don't know, it glorifies a man being a psychopath. I write it down and keep. The moment I don't have work at M-, I am pitching to my editor at First Post, and she's probably going to say yes because she likes me.
Is it a Vishal movie? Sorry.
No, this is the Wii movie that I watched.
I couldn't resist
No,
that.
she always says, she already said that it's
Still we.
all her movies are, whatever she watches is a bad movie. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I am a Kuppai Padam addict.
Yeah.
So then I write it down and I take that opportunity to do that work. This comes from years of experience of knowing that you will get work and work will find you. You probably have 2 days before you have to go back to the grind. And sort of thinking of those 2 days of free time that you have as something to cherish, right? So when I first got laid off, I watched about 7, 8, first time I got fired. I watched about 7, 8 Hitchcock movies because until then I hadn't watched any Hitchcock film. The next time I got laid off, I wrote a rebuttal to a story about the Rajnikant film Mannan. And there was an international magazine that published a story about Mannan, which I strongly disagreed with, and I wrote a rebuttal. It was like a 3,000 words article. Actually, these are the kind of things that helped me get out of really tough times. So I'd gotten laid off, I'd come back home, and my husband was in France at the time, and he wasn't going to come back for a month or so. And there was this very, we had just come to Chennai, and I didn't have too many friends. I didn't know what the hell to do. So I found this work as an opportunity. It kind of kept me anchored, right? It said, okay, however terrible you feel, you will be worthless once this article is written. For now, your worth is finishing this article. And once I personally put in that kind of work into that time, right, I get into the momentum of work. And there's always another idea waiting for me to pick up and do. And then, you start, you also in parallel do everything that Milinta said, right? I will send out emails to people. I will tell my old clients that I'm back on the market. I will call everybody on my network. I'll post on LinkedIn. All of that I will do. But to overcome that phase of worthlessness, I always have something else to do. This time in May, I had a really bad time, which is when I started the Foldworks. It has been an idea that I've been thinking about for over 2 years. I've had a couple of call starts with collaborating with other people as well, and it never really took off. But May, when I didn't have work, I was like, okay, maybe now is the time. Maybe this is a sign for me to start something new. And today it's a second business, and I have plans for it. When I saw that there is some kind of market for it, now I treat it as another business and I build it over time. So I think if you are if it's not a regular thing, right? Like Milinta said, think about why you're not getting work. And if it is not anything about your skill set or something specific to you, or like there's a reputation problem or anything like that, and it's either external factors or it's just a 1 week that, work will come, then use that time to do something you always wanted to do. And it's extremely rewarding.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay, that's a good point. But, this particular thing that we talked touched a little bit in the last episode, but something this is useful for the people who are just starting to do freelancing. How much money, of course, it varies from, Milinta also said, Ranjani said, how much money actually do people make when they start doing freelancing? And also, even 2-3 weeks ago, I saw somebody tweeting that they're ending the freelancing, going back to corporate world because collection is a big issue. Many people orally they have told me over the phone and all that stuff. So is it? Do all freelancing people get into agreement?
What do you want me to answer? How much money I can make, both. Should I get agreement?
Both.
Okay, I'm just going to be open about my numbers and give you a few. I think when I started freelancing, my first year was about 4 or 5 lakhs or something like that. And then it slowly became 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs. And we started it as a partnership firm in 2018. I'd made nearly 28 lakhs or so the previous year. And we've had a 40 lakh year and a 50 lakh year. The 50 lakh year is, of course, it's a team of people, right? I have 6 people now. I used to have 4 people at the end of like in December last year, I had 4 people. In May, I didn't have anybody. So since May, I have hired. So there's a lot of up and down in terms of how many people have worked with me. But there's definitely a lot of money to be made. And there are 2 ways in which that much money gets made. One is because I work with corporates. Like if I only worked as a journalist or a film reviewer, there probably isn't that much money. I work with corporates, that's one. I do specialist work. So I say, this is my price. If you cannot pay it, I don't want to work with you. And that's another. And I think, yeah, those 2 things generally, it's kind of, you like for me, there's a reputation that I'm expensive but worth it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that reputation. I don't care.
Well,
The
I mean,
other question was on collections.
Huh.
do people get agreement for beginning right from the beginning?
Yes. Nobody follows that agreement. Nobody cares. But just sending an agreement and forcing them to sign at least makes you look like a professional. Right? And I insist on an advance. Some of them pay, some of them don't. And I make concessions based on what gut feel I have about this person's integrity. But I insist on an advance. So that's one way to at least get half the payment or 30% of the payment that you're owed. Yes, collections is a problem. But I think I have written off maybe 3 lakhs worth. That's the total. Across 7 years, that's all I've written off. So as long as you're persistent and you hold them to account, it is, and like if the customer doesn't pay on time, like if I feel an integrity issue, I won't do a second project with them. And I tell them, like for me, this, you have not shown me in action that you value me, and therefore I don't want to continue working with you. And that's, I think, as a freelancer, you can say things. You can say whatever you want. Right? They're not going to, I mean, like I've already fired him, so I can say whatever the hell I want. But in essence, collections is a headache. But I don't think it is so bad that I would go back to full-time work. However, I'm also talking about businesses here. I'm talking about corporations who will pay you in advance. I'm talking about companies who collect advance from their customers so they understand that it's a regular thing. Like FirstPost will never give me an advance. Like Scroll paid me some 3 months later, Hindu paid me 3 months later. So if you're a journalist trying to get money from a publication, that's a completely different story as compared to the kind of work I do, where I can demand a certain set of standards to be met.
Okay.
Sure.
Milinda?
Yeah.
So mine would be a different perspective. So for example, Ranjini spoke about like running the business sort of a freelance business perspective, right? Mine would probably be more on the lines of the journalist trying to collect money perspective. Because it's in that, when you're a freelance consultant that way, I think there is, the money aspect is a bit of a problem because when you go up the ladder a little bit and you add a lot of value or you have a lot of experience as a consultant, then you can demand certain things. But if you're a freelancer who's just starting out and they put a contract in front of you and you're desperately in need of work, you're not going to say, oh no, I'm just going to work. I can't work at 6 in the evening. I can't work at 5 in the evening. You can't point out things. You can't reject work very easily. You can't reject the money that's coming to you very easily. Let's say in my field, if I worked as much as a full-timer works, if I work 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, then definitely I would probably make more money than the full-timer makes. But that's not what I want to do, right? If I could do that, then I would be a full-time, employee. I'm not, because I can't do that amount of work. So all of these, so you have to really pick and choose. You have to see if you want your convenience, your availability to be the factor that decides work, or you want money to be the factor that decides primarily your work. If it is money, then I would definitely say you have to look at full-time options also before you decide to become a freelancer. That's definitely important because you're not going, if you want to make as much money as a freelance consultant as when you're starting out, it's not easy. You will have to work like a full-timer. You will have to work like you are in a full-time job to do that. So that's something that's I know people who are freelancers who work for really less in education. Especially I started out with an organization which was the best in business, which paid the best in according to industry, as per industry standards. And when COVID hit and I was looking for outside work, absolutely horrified, guys, because it was the money that was getting paid was so less. It was the, if I worked 8 hours a day, I would make the same amount of money that I made as a starting salary in IT 10 years, 11 years ago. You know, that's the amount of money that gets paid. I was absolutely horrified. Even then, I had to think for a couple of days to say no to that, because at that point I had nothing to do. So I was like, what if I say no to this and everybody is like this? It was such a huge disparity. It was a large disparity between the best pay and the normal pay, the normal industry standard, you know. So all of these factors are important. So randomly, I wouldn't say it's okay, you come in, you can find work, you will make a lot of money. No, you have to pay very careful attention to these things if money is a primary concern to you, which of course it is, which is for all of us, right? And as far as collections are concerned, I think as a freelance consultant, it's slightly easier than when you're running a business, because you're only looking for smaller chunks of money. It's more like a salary that comes in based on the invoice that you raise, right? So when you sign your contract, the important thing is to go through it with a hawk eye, see the stipulated time within which you're going to be paid. As a freelance consultant, that's the most important thing. So 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, I'd say just tear up the contract, don't sign it. Nobody is going to wait 60 days for payment. So 30 days is the maximum. Maximum you can pull it to 45 days. Sign the contract and then ask for a single point of contact within the organization to talk about your finances. That's really important as a consultant. You can't keep sending emails to a higher up saying, hey, where's my payment? Hey, send me my money. You know, that's not, and you're going to feel degraded doing that. So you need a point of contact within any organization to receive your payment. Make that clear when you're signing the contract itself. So all of it needs to be in your contract. Also, any renegotiations of pay, or you know, when your rates, if you need a rate increase, how long is that going to take? When are they willing to renegotiate? Put all of that in your contract. So your contract for any freelancer is like the most important document of your work life, of your professional life. Yeah. So when all of this is already set in place, and ideally I would also suggest keep like an app, if you're using apps, or a spreadsheet to track all your payments, because if you work for 5 or 10 organizations, remember that also TDS comes into the picture. They are going to deduct TDS, which you'll have to claim later. So if you're tracking all of this in detail, then it's easier to track your collections and your payments. You can't just wing it, because this is the onus of getting paid is not on your employer, it's on you, right? So you have to keep a track of all of these things, and that by itself is a job. So keep a track of it in a very organized manner, and then it becomes, the collections and payment become a little bit easier.
Okay. Again, I just want to put in some small anecdotal thing here. So I also am in the training side. So what I find is when people want to quit the job, the first thing they think the easiest part is to get into some training, because they know something. They say, I'll teach soft skill, I'll teach this. And they'll come to me and say, Suresh, I want to get into training now. So I tell them one thing. That is perfectly fine. There are two things. First, you have to show the market that you're not a stopgap guy. You're not just coming in. The market does not want to give somebody for once and then the guy goes join a job. Second, I tell them, maybe I'm slightly harsh, but I tell them, the first year, you'll probably make only 30% of what you made in the corporate life. Are you ready for it? 90%, 99% drop out there. They do not, they think that right from day one, they can make money. When I quit and my boss asked, like, you are quitting, I told him, look, I'm very, very clear. At the end of the year, if I get around 40% of what I'm earning now, I'm perfectly fine. I know what it is, right? So this is not, then how you go up would depend a lot on how you plan it out. Whether, you want to continue as a freelancer, there is a limit. You will never reach a corporate level thing. But if you want to build a company and then, employ people and do that, that's a different ball game altogether.
I want to add just a point there.
Please.
So this movement from freelancer to company, right? Again, so last year we made 50 lakhs, but it was a loss-making year.
Yeah,
so the revenue was 50 lakhs, but I didn't make, I made loss. I brought in some of my own money to pay salaries and cover for expenses. So when you make that shift between being a freelancer and a company, there is another phase where you have to accept that your revenue is going to be very low, or what you take home. Your personal take home is going to be very low before you start making significantly more money. So there's another time that will happen in your growth phase.
Correct. Yeah, I remember I have a friend, he runs a travel company based out of Delhi. When I told him I'm moving out of IBM and I was going to be on my own, he said only one thing: Suresh, going on your own is like digging a well. It takes a lot of effort. But once you strike water, it is perennial. See, that's a very important thing to keep in mind, that you have to dig that well and it takes time. Now we're coming back to what Milinda is saying, that, of networking, especially when you want to get jobs, which every freelancer is worried about. Other than the networking part professionally, I think there's a lot of, dependency on your families and friends support and things like that, right? How important do you think that is? Because the first, obstacle to becoming a freelancer could be a family, for all that, I'm Milinda. Milinda is smiling.
Because she said because of both of them said because of family reasons, one may become a freelancer. You say obstacle, okay.
Okay, so for me, in my personal opinion, there is only one aspect of freelancing which requires probably additional support from your family, which, additional support from family may help you as opposed to having a full-time job, and that is entirely financial. Because you don't know how much money you will earn in a month. Say if you have like a certain chunk of money that needs to go somewhere every month, like a rent or a housing loan or an EMI, then it would be great to have like, a parent or a spouse say, hey, don't really worry about this. If you don't make this amount of money this month, if you can't do it, I will help you with it, or I will pull you out of it. So that sort of financial backing, if you have, then nothing like it if you're a freelancer. It really frees your mind if you have that, because otherwise you're spending every single day thinking of, I need to make this baseline money at least this month, right? If that worry is not there, then that's great, because that's something that family can help you with. I don't think friends can help you with that. It's probably family which you can depend upon for that. So that's the only place where I think family support adds to, being a freelancer. But otherwise, I don't know, guys. I think if you really want a career, you can have it with or without family and friends and support and all of that. It's all up to you. That's what I've seen in my life. I've not looked to family or friends, probably moral support from friends or networking, or hey, put in send me some contacts, or if you know somebody, refer me to that person. Or what about this course, or some sort of technical support. All of that can come from family or friends, or mostly friends. But other than that, I don't know. I think financially they can be of great support. If you have that, then nothing like it. It's easier to take the plunge as a freelancer if you have that sort of financial backing behind you, support behind you. Let's see what Ranjini has.
For me, it's the exact opposite. I couldn't be freelancing. I couldn't be a business person without Umesh, my husband, saying, it's okay. We've got this handled. First is financially. Because I started off after being fired, I was very, very nervous about finances, right? So what we did between the both of us was, he will take care of all the regular monthly expenses and I will take care of the yearly expenses. So what used to happen is paying property tax, going on a holiday, buying furniture, buying new TV, buying big expenses. I used to take care of because it didn't need monthly payouts. But he would take care of rent and water bill and current bill and all of that on a regular basis, right? So we kind of worked out in a manner that it was almost equal. That's one thing. But that for me is the smallest part, because it, like, within 6 months, I had very regular income. It took me just 6 months to set up a baseline of regular income month on month. But Umesh is kind of, he's the me that I resist. For example, there will be a time when I will get 3 business development calls in a day and I will go whine to him saying, everybody wants me to do so much work. And he will be the person who will stop and say, is that really something you want to whine about? Or is that something you want to celebrate? Right? There will be times when I will make mistakes, either with how I'm handling people or how I'm handling money. And he will be the guy who will say, do you really want to spend 40,000 rupees a month on software? Right? What I love about that relationship between the both of us is he will never stand in my way of doing anything. But he will ask me the questions that when I am not emotional, either too tempted or too excited or too sad, will not ask myself, right? So he's kind of the voice, like he makes me better. And I think as an entrepreneur, it grounds me. I do have a tendency to kind of swing between one end and the other. And he stops me and says, are you sure this is what you want? And for that, like without that relationship, I think I don't think I could have been an entrepreneur at all. The other thing is when you're going after something big, right? Especially when you have, like, I want to make a few crores and I want to hire 25 people and I want to do big things. It takes a toll on the family. For instance, there was a phase in my life where I used to work 14-hour days every single day. And he took care of a lot of things, like what are we eating, how much are we eating, do we have enough money, paying this person, paying that person. So there will be phases in your life where there might be intense work, and that does take a toll on people. And like I also, there's a lot of, so I'm a bit of an extrovert. I draw my energy from other people. So when I have a conversation with a client where the client says, I'm not up to standard, it takes a hit on, or it used to take a hit on my self-belief, right? Which will then invariably get transferred to him, because you do so much work from the house. The hostility is in the air. So for us, it's, even now, there is no clear separation between business and home. A lot of our conversations are either about my business or about his work. And I have nothing other than work. Like, I don't have children, I don't have dogs, I don't have like house and legacy and all that. And I hope that my work will be my legacy. That's a conscious choice I've made. I'm not saying anything about everybody else who's made other choices. I'm just saying, because that's a conscious choice I've made. Most often, my husband even comes secondary to my work, right? Or there will be a day when I'm getting trolled on Twitter and I am completely broken. And I will refuse to believe that he loves me. These are all difficult situations in a relationship. One is, if it's possible, please get mental health help. It helps. It has helped me. But the other is, if you are a sort of an intense person, the emotional impact of entrepreneurship that has on you and on your family is actually high. You need a partner or a spouse who understands that, who will like make you tea and be like, you know what, leave her alone. She's going to cry for an hour, but she's going to be okay. And between the both of us, it took time to get to that stage. Like now I can tell him, okay, now is not a good time, don't talk to me. But in the early years of our relationship, I didn't know what was going on with myself to clearly tell him how I would like to be treated. So it was a good thing that he has been with me throughout this time, and therefore he's seen me go through the ups and downs. But in my life, I think, like, if I were to give advice, if you're sharing a house with somebody, or if you are very closely in a relationship with somebody, entrepreneurship, if you're looking to do this with ambition for the long term, it is not the same as doing a full-time job, because the responsibilities are higher and the pressures are higher. So it is a good idea to have some kind of family support.
Okay, so the family, like Melinda said, I mean, it's okay. It has got a positive kind of a backup, or like Ranjani is just mentioning a check. That is also very important. Like it reminds me of Randy Posh. He had that kind of a relationship with his mom when he was down, tired, vexed, year after year. So how difficult this PhD course program is. And then he used to encourage him. He used to say wonderful, positive things. But the day when he got his doctorate, and he was bragging about, became very hyper. She introduced him to everyone, saying that, oh yeah, he's my son. He's a doctor, but not the kind who helps others. So, I mean, that's required to bring it down. I mean, yeah. So, that when we are talking about family support, there is also, given the very fact that both of you now talked about Suresh also mentioned uncertain or uneven, they're like undulated income is there. So what about recently, or not recently, a few months ago, somebody had a startup that came with insurance for freelance workers. Are there anything, some similar schemes are available for those who want to take up freelancing?
Not that I know of. All of the benefits that I need are individually planned. So insurance, medical insurance, my medical insurance is as an extension of my husband's. I know a lot of people who get top-up medical insurance on top of that as well. I do PPF, that's where my investment goes. So whatever benefits that you think you need, in my opinion, it's best arranged yourself.
Okay.
I haven't come across anything where somebody else takes care of benefits.
Okay. Melinda,
neither have I. No, I don't know. I don't know if anything like that. Like I told you earlier, just now we are getting to the stage where we are actually talking about having a union or a forum to even voice our opinions. We are only at this nascent stage right now. So to get to benefits and all of that, it's going to be a long journey from here.
Sure.
Suresh, you know anything, some very similar schemes are there? Some kind of...
not that I know of, Radman, because I also see that everybody freelancer is all of them are on their own. Right. In fact, many of them don't even network properly, in the sense that they are scared that the other guy can be their competitor. See, I try to go and get touch with competitors, especially when I'm taking classes in a place where there are multiple rooms and there are multiple people. And if I know some guy is in my same area, I make it a point to go and talk to the guy, introduce myself, give him my card, take his card, and tell him, boss, the thing is that if I get business and I can't I'll pass it on to you, and you do it to me. So, but somehow the feeling that, the guys are competitors gets into our mind too much, that you don't understand that your competitor in these areas is going to be your best friend, because there's nobody else who understands the same problem that you have, right?
Yeah.
So I just thought I'll
competitor thing. Just one small addition to address that competitor thing. What I do is, every time I say no to a project, I always pass it on to at least 2 other people who I wouldn't call competition, but people who can do that work. For example, if a non-tech work comes to me, right, I don't take it up. As much as possible, I say no to those things. So then I just pass it on to somebody else. And I've realized that they actually, the trust starts developing when you actually give them work.
Correct.
When you say, I will pass something on to you, they don't trust you. But the moment you actually pass something on to them and they make money out of it, they're like, why did you say no to this? It's like, that's not tech. But they don't understand when you say it to them, but when you do it the first time, they get it. So I think people, like, I've been able to build relationships with fellow writers and people who might be considered competition by just being that person who gives first. And
Right.
I've only got back multifold in return.
Okay. Now, coming to the next point, I don't know, Rajmohan, how much time we have, but anyway.
No, we already overshot the time. You please go. Please
Now,
go ahead.
let me ask Milinda and of course Ranjani this. See, one of the important things that we must take care as freelancers is updating our knowledge. So, how do you guys go about updating your knowledge? How important is that in your particular field?
In any field, I think it's extremely important to stay updated, especially as a freelancer, because I think Ranjani also mentioned at the beginning of our speaking, if you don't bring a certain extra something to the table, then your client is not going to want you. If your full-timer can do the exact same thing that you do, then they don't need you at all, right? So you need to stay updated. You need to keep yourself updated. From what I've seen in my field in education, in any organization, the opportunities for training and upskilling that are available to full-time employees are also equally available to freelancers. So whether it's the 5-6 organizations that I've worked with, any training material that they have, any courses that they conduct, or anything that they refer to or pay for, have always been open to freelancers as well. So it's up to you. But one thing is that nobody is going to come to a freelancer and say, hey, you have to do this. It's entirely up to you and your own interest. I've seen so many of my colleagues, freelancers, who just pass it up saying, I know these things. I like what I'm doing right now. Why should I bother with all of this? Let me just work for these 2 hours and make some more money. No, guys, that's not how it works. One thing is that the client or the organization will look at how much interest you show in upskilling yourself. That is also going to land you more work in the future. It's going to build trust with the client as well. And it's also going to keep you upskilled, right? So when it's open to you, it is open to you in many fields. Take up all the opportunity that your client itself provides to you. Outside of that, of course, you can do online courses. You can look for upskilling opportunities in any field that you are in. I know there's a lot of opportunity in tech, especially because we have like a lot of open source knowledge out there. It's entirely up to you. But as a freelancer, like I said, nobody is going to force knowledge on you. You have to take it up yourself actively without thinking of it as a waste of time, right? So
Sure.
that's something that the opportunities are there. That much I'm sure of. You can look. You have to be active about taking it up. That's all.
Yeah, let me put up a small supplementary question here. Is should freelancers also invest in getting themselves trained? Because as you said, a lot of open source knowledge is there, but still some of them may need you to invest some money. So what would be the way you look at it?
Ranjani, do you want to take that?
Sure.
I mean, either of them, yeah.
In addition to what Milinda is saying, I've also realized that I am not enthused by sitting down and doing a course. So the way I learn is by throwing myself at the deep end of every challenge, right? So for instance, one of our very few outbound inquiries, I went and met this person who kept talking about something called Kubernetes. Right? I had no clue how to spell that also. I had misspelled it miserably in my notes during that meeting. And somebody kept saying KHS, and I was like, if that's the same thing, I don't even know, right? But then I came back home, and so this person had told me, you won't even understand the technology we're talking about. And I told him, okay, give me a chance. What have you got to lose? And I came back home, and I did everything in my power to at least understand theoretically what it is. I don't need to do anything in Kubernetes. I need to write about it. So there's a difference in the level of understanding, right? Having knowledge is completely different from having able to apply it. So my husband works in DevOps. So I sat him down and I said, you explain Kubernetes to me. Like that's the dinner conversation, right? And I also reached out to a few friends who work in the cloud space and try to understand containers and with virtual machines and micro virtual machines and things like that. So I keep throwing myself into the deep end where I have to learn to accomplish something. If I have to get that contract, I need to understand this. And that's how I've understood most technology that I've understood so far. And it's also because you want that contract, right? Because you want to impress that client, you'll go that one step higher. The third article or the fourth article, you won't put in that much effort because you've already got the contract and you already have a bit of a learning. So I understand myself and sort of play little mind games with myself to make sure that that learning is there. Your answer to paying for learning, right? The one thing I've always paid for is coaching. So when I first got fired from my job, I didn't know what to do. I got myself a career coach who did a few tests to understand my personality and what kind of work might suit me and all that. And together we had identified that freelancing might be an option. Because until then, I had believed that I do not have a risk appetite. And therefore, I can never be a freelancer. But while working with her and doing some tests and some, I don't know, these online test type things, right? We figured out that I actually have way higher risk appetite than I gave myself credit for. Then to my transition from that to being a freelancer, I had a coach. I made a lot of mistakes hiring and training people over the last couple of years. So now I have a leadership coach who walks me through setting systems for like having what do you expect from your team, how to communicate the expectations, how to review whether they're meeting the expectations, what to look for when you hire, how to look for attitude when you hire and not just skill. So there's a wide range of things that she is helping me with at the moment. It costs a lot of money to have a coach. Like in the beginning, it was not that expensive, but now to have a leadership coach and an organizational coach is very, very expensive. But I think of it as a necessary expenditure. If I need to go to the next level, I need to learn faster than making my own mistakes and learning. I don't have the time to like I don't have another 2 years to experiment on these 6 people that I currently have and learn how to be a leader from it. So if I need to do that in 6 months, I need help. And I think if it feels like the right kind of investment, it definitely is worth it. The only thing I would say is there is always a tendency to rush into these kind of decisions, right? There's a 500 rupee online course. I will buy it and keep, we will see. And then you never really finish that course, right? So what I would encourage people to do is think about these things. I didn't wake up one morning, decide I want a coach and got a coach. I've been thinking about it for 6 months. I've been speaking to multiple coaches before I identified who feels right, with whom I have a certain rhythm. And then I started working with them. So spend a little more time thinking, what is your problem? What do you want to learn? And how do you want to learn that before actually putting money into it? But more importantly, putting time into it. As a freelancer, your time is more worth than the money you can actually make for that time.
Right. Yeah, Rajmi.
Yeah, it's okay. So we are completely run out of time. So only because they of course the previous episode also I wanted to ask about customer loyalty. They already both Melinda and Ranjani have answered that. Anyway, so whatever that Suresh, Melinda, and Ranjani they are telling, all these things are. I'm sure that it will help a lot of young people who want to take up the freelancing, whatever the field may be. And also a lot of positive things that came out of today's discussion. And for those I refer to Randy Pausch, and those who don't know yet, those who have not seen his last lecture, maybe there's one 10-minute capsule he talked only for 10 minutes in Oprah Winfrey's show. So that link, we will put it in the description for the benefit of all the viewers. So thank you very much, Suresh. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, Ranjani. Hopefully we will have episode 3 of this also.
I would like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure being here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye. Bye.